out of their call.
It's going to be yours.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, Council and City Manager. We have an agenda tonight for our study session with 3 items. We start with the South Prince Street roundabout discussion. And Director Gloston, are you going to kick this off?
I'm going to introduce our traffic engineering consulting team that will make the presentation. From the firm of Fellenberg, FHU. We have Jenny Young, who is a principal with the firm. Charlie Buck, who is a transportation engineer. And Michelle Stevens, also a transportation engineer. It's all up to them and have at it.
Okay. And you must be Charlie.
Yes, I'm Charlie Buck. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a traffic engineer with Feldsburg Holt Millavig. I'm here with Michelle Stevens. She'll be helping me with the presentation. She's more focused on design, and I tend towards the traffic side of things. Let me just start up this little PowerPoint here. So we were asked to take a look at this intersection at Prince Street and Centennial Drive initially, just to see what exactly were some of the traffic issues with it, what was driving some of the concerns, and then that discussion expanded into more of a corridor approach to Prince Street between Bellevue and Santa Fe. One of the first things we do when we do traffic analyses, we collect the data, traffic counts, we do some looking at accident history. We also did some field observations. I went out to the site and just looked at some of the traffic operations that currently exist today, looked at the intersection and the corridor, saw some of the conflicts that do occur, some of the problems with that rather large intersection there at Centennial Drive. The capacity analyses that we do, it's a report card. You get a level of service A through F. We did see some existing congestion in the PM peak hour. In particular, you have a level of service F on the eastbound leg at Centennial Drive. The accidents, we have about 4 years of accident data, and within those years, there's an average of about 5 intersections per year. There were 20 accidents, and 18 of those accidents, coincidentally, were angle accidents, like T-bones or oncoming turn accidents. Those are the type of accidents that tend to suggest that there's a need for some kind of traffic control improvement. One of the problems with the Prince Street Centennial Drive intersections is proximity to Bellevue. It's only about 400 feet of separation between that large intersection, large signalized intersection up at Bellevue and Centennial Drive. Typically, when you're thinking of doing traffic signals, you like to space them at least 600 feet. Sometimes traffic signals can be spaced a little closer, maybe 500 feet, but 400 feet really precludes installing a traffic signal at Centennial Drive. In addition, traffic volumes really don't suggest warrants would be met. There is a possibility to put an all-way stop control at that intersection. However, the size of the intersection, number of lanes, some of the complexities involved suggest that maybe you'd have to reconfigure the intersection, tighten it up a little bit to do that. Yes, sir.
Where are I know the intersection, but is there a particular pattern on where the cars are coming from that are in these accidents? For instance, are they coming off Centennial trying to get across?
They're coming off Centennial either trying to get onto Prince Street or to get
To go
across. But I would say that just in looking at the accident diagrams, they don't always tell you where someone is going, just where they're coming from when they're in the accident. So what direction they're heading when they make that accident. Most of the accidents are eastbound, colliding with through traffic that's on Prince Street. So given that there's some kind of traffic control improvement indicated, given that signals is probably an unlikely candidate, and all-way stop may also have some problems, we thought we'd look at a roundabout. And we did level of service analyses and projections of future traffic operations. Roundabout would operate at level of service A through the foreseeable future. For the rest of the corridor, I should say that when we analyzed the roundabout, we considered a single circulating lane, which means just 2 lanes, northbound and southbound, one through lane per direction. Prince Street currently has a 4-lane configuration, although the traffic volumes are well within the capacity of a 2-lane roadway. Rule of thumb says 10,000 vehicle trips per day are appropriate for a 2-lane capacity. We're currently in the around 7,000 trips per day. In the future, that might go as high as 9 or 10,000, but we're still within the capacity of a 2-lane roadway. So given that the roundabout is going to suggest single-lane, circulating lane, why not reduce some of the laneage on Prince Street and use that extra right-of-way for pedestrian and bicycle enhancements? So with that, our suggestion is that the intersection get converted to a roundabout and we do some roadway narrowing on Prince Street in between Santa Fe and Bellevue. And then approaching those intersections, we would flare out to meet the current lane configuration and get all the turn lanes that are needed in. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michelle, and she can...
Charlie, before you leave that, just go back to the diagram. Before you leave, I see you're looking at the single lane piece that goes from the curb cuts to the south, then kind of merging, then expanding as it moves to the intersection at Bellevue.
Right.
And maybe this is an aesthetic question as opposed to a traffic question. Is it because of the site near that curve that exists on Prince Street that you think distracts folks, or at least doesn't give you the clear sight line, particularly for those folks heading north on Prince?
That's right on target, and it's also a problem for southbounders judging oncoming traffic coming from the south around that curve. Sight lines are a little confusing, and that's a very good point.
Thank you.
Sure. Michelle?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is the configuration that we've come up with at this level of design. It's a concept level, and it's a single-lane roundabout with single-lane approaches with pretty much every leg except the north leg. We have a 2-lane approach going southbound based on the traffic operations. We also have included crosswalks across every leg, and we also have ramps for bike lanes. We know you have a really nice trail system in this area, and sharrows going on Centennial, and then we have on Prince Street, we're proposing looking at bike lanes. So that's kind of the configuration we're looking at right now for the roundabout. just want to talk about a few other roundabouts in the area. There are some single-lane roundabouts. Lakewood, of course, has one near their Civic Center area. They're building one right now at 14th and Lamar that's going to have a really interesting art piece in the middle, so you might want to check that out in November. We also have one at Inglewood has a roundabout there. And this is at Arapahoe Road and Peakview and Peoria, and that is similar to what we're proposing. The only real difference is that we do have 2 lanes going to the north, going away from Arapahoe Road towards Peakview Avenue. So it's pretty similar if you want to drive that roundabout and get a feel for it. That's going to be similar to what we would propose at Prince and Centennial. So on Prince Street, we're looking at possibly bike lanes. Now that we're going from a 2-lane in each direction to a 1-lane, we do have some room to provide bike lanes. And we're looking at maybe 6 foot, but depending on if you want to try to preserve existing curb, we could widen those a little bit, add maybe more striping so that we could reduce some costs there. So here's some graphics to show you what that might look like. So this is, the roundabout is just to the north, and this is coming down to the south. And we're going to try to keep the existing medians intact. They already accommodate the traffic volumes we need for those left turn lanes. And I do have a typical section that kind of shows what that might look like with the bike lanes and the traffic lanes. We also have the sidewalks that, north of that match line, we're going to have 10-foot sidewalks to enhance the area near the roundabout, especially when we have ramps, taking bikes up to the ramps to the sidewalks. And then continuing down to Santa Fe, we'll continue the bike lanes, and then the traffic lanes will expand out as you approach Santa Fe, so you will have the turn lanes. So we did come up with some ballpark costs to give you an idea. Just construction costs for the roundabout and all the improvements along Prince, looking at about $660,000. And overall, if you include all aspects of the project, it's $967,000. And as we refine the roundabout, we'll find some more cost savings to bring that down. And I just want to kind of go over some benefits of roundabouts. Here's some brochures that you can pick up. So there's some definite safety improvements because roundabouts operate at lower speeds, and it also has lower conflict points, which I'll kind of go through the conflict points first. So if you come to a normal signalized intersection or a 4-way stop, you're going to have about 32 points of where you could possibly have a crash with another vehicle. So to reduce that, that's what kind of came with the evolution of roundabouts, is how can we reduce those left turn T-bone accidents? That was kind of the most dramatic accidents that you were seeing at intersections, and the most fatalities were because of those left turn T-bone type accidents. So with a single lane roundabout, you're looking at 8 conflict points. So 8 points where you could hit someone. And the other beauty of having a roundabout is that if you do hit someone, it's usually a side swipe. It's not a major high-speed crash. So that really reduces fatalities or injuries. So it really reduces the accidents. We also wanted to look at pedestrian safety. We understand there's a lot of pedestrians that use this area, and so we wanted to make sure that we're accommodating those factors as well. And because roundabouts do operate at lower speeds, there's more reaction time. So there was a study done by the Transportation Research Board, and what they found that there was no fatalities in the period that they were looking at, but all the accidents that they observed were just close calls, and they were so there was no injuries with any of the pedestrians, and so so it's because you can react quicker. So if there is someone that does something that they shouldn't be doing, you can react quicker and step back onto the curb or something. So there's more reaction time with a roundabout. There's also less conflict points. As you can see with the squares on the upper graphic, there are about 24 points of where a pedestrian could get hit. Whereas in a single lane roundabout, you have less than that, and in this diagram shows 8 that could be a potential conflict. The other ideal thing about roundabouts is that when you do go across the crosswalks, you're only looking in one direction of traffic at a time. So you're only looking at one set of traffic coming this way, and then when you go to the other side, you're only looking at one side this way. So it really helps you focus on where those cars are coming from, and because of low speeds, that's also a benefit. And with roundabouts, usually you just have a lower exposure. You have less length of crossing. Whereas you can see in a typical signalized intersection, you usually have to go through not only through lanes, but maybe sometimes right turn lanes and left turn lanes. So by compacting it with a roundabout, you only have 1 or 2 lanes that you have to cross. So it really reduces the amount of exposure you have to those vehicles.
Before,
you want to go back?
It
Sure.
has the same diagram on that next one, too.
Oh, do you want me to go next one?
I'm just looking at that
Okay.
one, and that is not quite the configuration you and Charlie are suggesting, because it's 2 lanes going.
This is
into
just
the-
to provide the concept of where the crossings. So it's not just supposed to replicate what we're proposing. So the other thing about roundabouts is you do have some flexible bike users. You could have the experienced bicyclists who, because of the slow speeds of roundabouts, they can, what they call is take a lane, they can ride with traffic. So when an experienced commuter bike goes through a roundabout, they'll get into the center of the single lane and take the lane and go through the roundabout. If you're like me and don't like to drive with the traffic, you would get off at a ramp, which I showed earlier, some of those ramps that we're going to propose, so that you can get off and go on the sidewalk with your bike and then walk across the crosswalks and then get back on. So I prefer that because I like biking, but I'm not that brave, I guess. So also a real good benefit, and what I've been hearing a lot lately when I go back to visit the areas I've had roundabouts, is the reducing of congestion. People say, well, I could just drive right through. I don't have to stop. Especially during peak hour traffic, I still can just drive right through. I don't have to wait for a whole cycle of a signal. Sometimes those can be 90 to 120 seconds of waiting. They seem like maybe 5 minutes sometimes, but that's usually the time frame. So these provide continuous flow, which is a real benefit. There's 20% less reduction of delay. So if you need to get over to the grocery store or you're starving and need to go get your hamburger at the fast food place, you can get there quicker. So that's another benefit. 30% to 50% increase in traffic capacity. So that means you're getting more traffic through it as well. So that helps with the delay reduction. And the other beauty thing about roundabouts is that you can make them your own. You can provide some character to the area. You can make them aesthetically pleasing. These are from Grand Junction and Lakewood. And like I said, the one that we're building right now in Lakewood is going to have a sculpture that actually lights up at night. It's going to have LED lights that light up at night. And they kind of turn colors. I think you see it like maybe at the airport. They have that sign that changes colors. And it also provides a traffic calming benefit because people are slowing down to go through the intersection. So that helps with that. And then quieter operations because the slower speeds, it's quieter. You don't have the large or the loud trying to get through that red light kind of speeding. And the opportunity for public art. So that also provides aesthetics. Just some good benefits for roundabouts that you don't see in signalized intersections. And because we do have users in the area that are older, we want to look and see what was involved with that. Oh. Well, you'll benefit from this. So Ken Sides, he's an expert in this area, and so he's a good friend of mine. So I asked him if he could provide some slides for me. So one thing he's pointed out is that because of slower speeds, you have more time to react, more time to perceive the situation. So that's a good benefit of roundabouts for those users. You can judge the gaps better in a roundabout than if you're signalized and you're trying to do a left turn, you got people speeding. It's a little faster reaction time, so it's a little slower with the roundabout. It's less complicated to interpret the roundabout. As you're coming up to a roundabout, you only have to look one direction of travel. You don't have to look at the whole intersection. You just look at what's coming to you from the left. So that really helps simplify what you need to focus on when you're coming towards a roundabout. It reduces demands to quickly perform wide visual scans. They actually did a study in Japan, And they did state that at a roundabout, you have to turn your head less than you would at a signalized. They actually did sensors on people's necks to see how much they had to turn at the different intersections. So that's another benefit. You don't have to look as far to make a judgment call. The speeds, like I said, are very low. For a single lane, you're looking at 20 to 25. The one I did in Edwards was about 15 miles per hour posted, and the one at 14th and Lamar will be posted 20 miles per hour. And they're very forgiving environment. I tell you, you have more reaction time, so if you do, go a little bit too soon, then you can stop, and people will usually look out for you. So it's more forgiving environment than a signal where if you run a red light, or if you are trying to turn left and you miss the gap, that's a little bit more not as forgiving. So there are low energy crashes. Like I said, you don't have the wide visual scans, and you don't have to look over your shoulder for like a right turn lane to judge traffic. So it does have a lot of benefits for older users. And if you want to find out more, AARP has a whole website that's dedicated to modern roundabouts and how they work for different age groups. So that's another site you might want to look into. So, but that's all I had for you today, unless you have some questions.
Questions, council? Just one.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, I guess a couple of questions. I mean, at some point, I heard the comment about not appropriate for a traffic light, and I get that it's close to Bellevue. And yet, on a relative cost basis, which has to be some level of consideration. I mean, traffic light's got to be less than $1 million, doesn't it? So in terms of, maybe it's a staff question to Charlie or Michael, but where do you guys prioritize this project in terms of the budget vis-a-vis other road improvement requirements or priorities in the community?
Tim Weaver, our traffic analyst, and I have spent some time studying the accidents, the crashes at this location, and we feel something does need to be done. And we looked at three alternatives: a four-way stop, a traffic signal, and roundabout. And we feel that the roundabout has, as indicated by the consultants, significant benefits to the community, and that it doesn't qualify for a traffic signal. And we don't like the idea of a four-way stop because of the size of the intersection. That's why we asked FHU to go in this direction. To directly answer your question, Councilman, we feel that this will be a 2015 budget consideration, and we will put this project into that program to say we would like to try and do this in 2015 and see if it does make the cut with other budget considerations. But Michael and I have discussed this. Both of us are strongly in favor of moving ahead with this kind of creative concept for traffic management at an intersection like this. It fits perfectly is what we want to do.
And it's probably jumping the gun, but I mean, is this something that would be an opportunity for some sort of a grant program to help defray some of our costs? Does a possibility exist or not?
I don't know of one, but we could try.
I'm just curious.
Dr. Cog might have a program where they would fund at least part of the cost of it if we can look. I have not studied that at all.
Okay, thanks.
Bruce?
I'm not sure if it's for Charlie or who could answer this, but a major feature of what you're suggesting at that intersection is the modification of the lanes that approach the roundabout. What if you did that same modification of lanes to a four-way stop, and then you would mitigate the issue of it being so many lanes wide?
Oh, reduce the overall
reduce it down. What would be
for the four-way stop?
Yeah, to a four-way stop of single lanes in all four directions, because you're sort of doing that as you bring it into the roundabout.
The site distance is a concern that we do have, and because of the number of accidents, that is one concern we have with the two-way in the current condition. That still might alleviate a little bit by having the four-way stop, but I think Charlie might have some more information on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Because if you were going to convert that to a four-way stop, I think you would really want to do some intersection reconfiguring. And at that point, you know, it's kind of, you're doing very similar construction activity as you would with a roundabout. So it's a possibility.
But with the costs that I'm hearing you say, probably not a significant cost savings.
Well, I'd hate to say without actually, you know, looking at a preliminary concept, but you would have to do a lot of the similar, you know, curb and gutter, pavement removal, that kind of stuff to get your intersection configured to where it would be appropriate for a four-way stop.
Thank you.
And Charlie, while you're there, I've seen presentations on tactical urbanism, which change some traffic patterns without necessarily going through all the costs, just to see how it would work to be able to do that. I'm not looking for it this evening, but at least considering kind of being able to test it before the actual construction cost to see that indeed it would tend in that direction to be able to solve the issues that are there without necessarily having to go through all the construction costs on the front end.
Right. So you're saying cone and barrel and kind of maybe some paint and do a sort of a temporary roundabout configuration as a trial. It's a possibility.
That's been done on a fairly economic basis. The one question I did have is knowing there is some pedestrian traffic in that area.
Yes.
I'm taking it that the state laws on crosswalks for pedestrians is that the pedestrians will, you know, once they kind of step in the direction, will have the right of way.
Yes.
On that, and so that's why I was looking at testing it. So some consideration for what that might do, and even taking the traffic a little bit slower, is to take a look at what the pedestrian traffic will do, particularly at certain times during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good point.
Oh, Peggy first.
So I have two questions. One in the traffic analysis, the accident analysis. Were those accidents at particular times of the day? I mean, were they clustered at certain times?
You know, I think they're pretty representative of the day. Yeah, I'd have to look at them. I do have them with me, but I'd need a minute or two.
Yes, I mean, I was curious whether the eastbound traffic might have more accidents in the morning because of the sun, which depend certain places that can, you know, be the factor.
Right. Yeah. Well, with the sun glare in the morning, that could be a factor. I think also it's also an exposure factor, or you know, the number of people who want to make that turn, and that might be also in the morning when people are headed out to work.
Then I'm trying to remember what the roundabout looked like, but where will the snow get plowed?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me. I might leave that one for Michelle.
Well, we've had discussion pretty much in every roundabout I've designed, and usually it's worked out with whoever, is this something that the city would be plowing? City for, so we just make sure that the city plows would understand how to you know, operate. There's videos already accessible by TRB and FHWA that shows how to do a snow plow through a roundabout. So, and there's over 2,000 roundabouts in the U.S. right now. There's 10,000 in France right now. So, so plowing is not really a major issue. It's just making sure that they understand how to plow it, because you can chip those curb and gutters. That's the one thing that does happen. So there's a maintenance issue with that. But usually once they get it down the first time, then they do a pretty good job at doing it.
Well, I think our folks generally do really good work, but
It's new, right?
I've seen the little bitty roundabouts that we have some problems.
Well, this is designed for a larger truck vehicle, so it should be able to accommodate a snowplow, and we can definitely run a snowplow.
But it's where they push it that becomes the problem. And if you've got bicyclists and pedestrians who walk and bike when there's snow,
it's the same situation as signalized intersection. You save the same plowing kind of issues. It's going to be very similar with the bike lanes.
I
And
think it's a little different for those from what I've seen. But anyway, so
well, that'd be something we could work out with the city.
if they say it can be done, then maybe we'll put heat under the intersection. I'm teasing. But anyway, so thank you.
Okay.
Andy?
This is for Director Bloston. I have a much less artful way of, I think, asking the same question that Councilmember Stallman did, so bear with me. So, first of all, I think this is a very, very graceful solution to the problem. What we haven't talked about is that we have a really successful bike shop that's a block away, and I, for one, am always in that intersection on the way into the bike shop, so I think that's a great solution to that. My question kind of is, boy, it's a lot of money, and I'm wondering, is it because of the proximity to some of our more senior housing, the proximity, or not proximity, but the location of our greatest per capita or measured in whatever way you do traffic incidents, or, I mean, why this space versus anywhere else in Littleton?
The intersection is very large. And as I said earlier, we looked at three alternatives: a full signal intersection, a stop sign, or this. And this intersection is so big that it doesn't require a lot of right-of-way to be obtained in order to make this happen. And I don't believe we're taking out any structures in order to make this occur. And it works. And that's why we hired FHU to study this, to say, this is an idea, does it work? And their response back was yes. There aren't a whole lot of other places in Littleton that we could do something like this. We have studied a couple of other locations, but this is far and away the best one that we have come up with in order to do our first roundabout. We did look at Mineral and Dry Creek, for example, and we would have to remove houses in order to make it happen there. That's the only other location that I can say actually could be used as a roundabout site. But that's a two-lane road in all directions, and as a result, it would take up a lot of space. Let me address the question of Councilwoman Cole here a minute ago. If they can plow snow in the mountains in Vail, Beaver Creek, Avon, and Eagle, we can do it here. I'm not concerned about that for a second, because those towns have an extreme amount of experience in plowing snow at roundabouts. And you obviously saw at least one in Breckenridge, where they must face a lot more snow than we do.
Thank you.
Bruce? Peggy asked the traffic glare question.
Charlie and Michelle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up is the C&B follow-up, Denise and Kristen.
I'm going to try and use this microphone because I was told that I talk with my hands quite a bit, and I need to use this one, so we'll see if this works. Okie dokie. Wonderful. So I hope this isn't double mic'd. Does it sound okay, you guys?
Great.
Not too, okay, wonderful. So where we are today with the downtown signage and wayfinding is the last time I saw you guys, we were at 3 options. So if you remember, I brought 3 options of banners. We talked through how we had vetted those options and created them with the community, the responses that we heard back. I do have a really quick overview of the project itself, but since we went through this last time, I'm going to go pretty quickly. Stop me if you have questions or if there's something that you didn't remember from last time, but I just wanted to reiterate reiterate, because we did put a lot of effort into outreaching to the community, and I think that the final design actually really reflects a lot of the comments that we received, and so I feel like it is a very responsive design in that regard, and I'd like to honor the participation that we got from the Littleton community. So the scope of the project was to look at signage and wayfinding, and also streetscape improvements for benches, trash, the furnishings palette in downtown. And the reason behind this project was twofold. One, to increase legibility in the downtown. So it is difficult if you are a person who is unfamiliar with Littleton, or even in my case, having lived here for years, if you are familiar with Littleton, to figure out how to get around, to know what assets are available, both within and contiguous to the downtown. So the signage points to things in the downtown core, which is the football area that we know from Prince Street and South, but also things that are just right outside of it, or really important cultural and civic destinations within town. So that was the first goal, is legibility. And then the second is something that we call placemaking, which is saying, okay, Littleton has a sense of place, but in the downtown, there isn't everything that we could do to make that sense of place really transparent. So one of the things that we're doing with the signage program is looking to increase the sense of appeal, the sense of storytelling, the sense of image making in downtown Littleton, and we call that placemaking. So that's the big project in a nutshell. We're like at the finish line, which is pretty exciting. Not the absolute finish line, we have a couple more weeks, but as far as final design is concerned, that's what I'm going to be sharing tonight, and I really wanted to show that to you guys. So, as you know, we started out with existing conditions. There's a report that I created that is an existing conditions report documenting what signage is available, the conditions of the street itself, some touching on traffic patterns and pedestrian crossings, also bicycle crossings, and flows of people and bikes. The report is pretty comprehensive, but it's a way of getting to the core question of what signs are needed. What do we need to be telling people? Where are the congestion points? Where are the decision-making points? Where are the conflict points? Then we also looked at downtown destinations. These are the things that are in and around the football area that speak to the history of Littleton or existing resources and amenities within the community. So we looked at that, documented it. Then we did our preliminary what signs are needed map. So I brought that last time, the lots of little dots. Each dot represents a type of sign. And we'll go through the types of signs tonight, which I think is, again, last time we only had the 3 big kinds, but now we've really broken it out into the granularity of palette that spreads across the town. So I'm very excited to show that. And I think I clicked, sorry. We also did a staff walk, and then we did a walk with you guys. So I'm sorry to take pictures and not tell you, but this was a really fun walk. The thing that came out of Council Walk is the comprehensive thinking about gateways. So we had been talking about gateways, as you saw in the 3 different options. We kind of designed some art ideas for the gateways preliminarily. But once we got on the street and we really looked at it as a group, we realized that there are a lot more problems with the gateways beyond what could be solved through just art. So we began at that point to look a little bit more comprehensively at gateways and focused on not just physical improvements to signage, but physical improvements to the street itself. And then throughout the process, we've really met quite a bit with people in Littleton. You'll remember the embarrassing sign that followed me everywhere at the beginning of this process. That's not me, but that is me. So we did a lot of talking with people. Through these interactions, we gleaned 2 things. One, that Littleton was very important to its residents, and that people did have some concerns about legibility, and were excited to see something that would address even simple issues like, how do I find parking? How do I find destinations? If I am a first-time resident or I'm bringing my family into town, how will that person know how to get around and realize the assets within downtown? We had the banners up with the 3 different options all over downtown, 3 different places, the Town Hall Arts Center, the Rec Center, and the library. We got quite a number of responses from these, very thoughtful responses. I really do treasure these. It was a 1-pager, so it wasn't an extensive survey, but people did really take the time to write not just their preference, but also other concerns that they had about signage. Again, that kind of undercurrent of love of Littleton was, part of the dialogue, is really wanting to celebrate the experience of Littleton and its history and people. And then we had really great response for social media. So the Open Littleton site, Facebook, continues to get comments. And then these merchant one-on-one conversations. So this is something that sort of emerged during the middle of the project and really became the cornerstone of understanding from a merchant perspective what they would like to see, what their concerns are. These are still ongoing. I actually have 2 outstanding that I keep rescheduling. So either their schedule or my schedule doesn't line up. But I feel like my takeaway from these conversations is they felt very much like a gift. When we think about a city like Littleton, it's really built on stories, and those stories are cumulative. They make sort of a social fabric of place. And often when you talk to people who have invested in downtown as their livelihood and as their shop, you really do get a sense of how deep those stories run. So this was a very nice way for me to dig a little bit deeper into the particularities of what signs would be very valuable and what messaging on those signs would be very valuable. So overall, we have a little bit more than this now, but over 441 preferences. And then the demographics that we saw got a lot of 60 and over, a lot of 50 and over, and a little bit less as we go down. And that actually is the same graph that you see for population in Littleton, except we've got some more young people, 17 and younger, than showed up. So for the design itself, once we kind of gathered that picture of what's needed, what's valuable, we dug into the design. And that's where we came up with the preliminary options. And from that standpoint, we took the comments that we received, looked at the preliminary option, talked with staff, talked with the working group, and really started narrowing down what we could do to combine all the things that people liked about these 3 options and take out all the things that people didn't like. So this is my favorite part of the design process. It's super fun. It's the most challenging. It's the most creative. And the final design direction, these were the key tenets. That it be classy and meaningful. These are sort of direct quotes from different people. Reflective of history, but modern. Incorporation of storytelling. This kind of had a larger umbrella, but the idea of being able to draw in historic stories so we could tell them within the signage palette, but again with the idea that it's not just history, that we have to look to the future and it has to be modern and reflective of a modern growing town, which Littleton is. Then this one, less strong color, better color balance. So we, as you know, Littleton's colors are red and yellow and black. And so we had some colors that were very, here's my red, right? We had lots of red, we had lots of yellow, and people were like, it looks like Wendy's. So we went from that sort of extreme to something that's a little bit more refined in color balance. This incorporation, this cupola was a real flashpoint for the community. It was like, we love it, but can you make it less cupola-ish? Can you diminish the cupola? We want to see it, but it shouldn't be as prominent. The cupola design, the people who liked it because it evoked a story. It evoked history. It had some meaning. Some of the comments for the other signs that from people who didn't like them as much were that it just didn't have a sense of place. It didn't have a strong emotional tie the way that the cupola design did. And then this idea of creating strong and memorable gateways, some people wrote that in, but I really did hear that strongly from you guys too. And then once I circled back to the merchant community with that feedback, they were like, heavens, yes, absolutely. And then helpful to side street, Alamo Street businesses. As you guys know, Main Street is really successful. It's easy. If you know where Main Street is, if you have a shop on Main Street, you have challenges, but at least you're not struggling with the additional challenge of, gee, I didn't even know there were shops on side streets, or gee, I didn't even know there were shops on Alamo Street. So that kind of, again, when we circle back to the legibility piece, that's really what the merchants on the side streets and Alamo Streets are hoping for, is some legibility, some raised awareness of their shops. And they were hoping that the signage could help them do that. Okay, so here's where I get to walk around. So this is our signage palette final, and this is our most this is our most common auto ped sign. And I'm going to walk you through it because there's some level of detail, and then we'll go sort of more quickly through all the little versions of it because you'll see repetitive patterns and ideas. So in general, it is a titanium color, which is an almost black, because if you're doing street furnishings, you really, really don't want to do true black because it fades even if you've got the best paint and the best powder coating. You just don't want it to look dingy. That's really, you want to have that 20-year life of really vibrant. So the titanium is like a 90% black. It also has a bit of a shimmer. And we've pulled that into the streetscape palette too, so that everything kind of has that same very classy look. Again, the black and red and yellow being our core color palette. But the way that it works is this piece is actually a little bit more three-dimensional. And this is where we've taken the 3-form material and encased it in a steel punched column. So this sticks out just ever so slightly. The whole thing is very diminutive in width. So at its widest, it's 11 inches, which I don't think I'm even showing accurately. But this piece is the wide piece. And inside, you can illuminate this. Now, as you guys remember with the 3-form, you don't have to illuminate it. This on its own gathers light and the edge glows just from sunlight. It's, again, that very durable, graffiti-proof surface. You saw it last time, but I'll pass it around. So the red, thank you, Peggy. The red is actually the 3-form with steel in front of it. And the beauty of this is you can illuminate it or not. And there is a cost difference. So if we're looking at this to be like $8,000 to $10,000 per, if you get up to 10, that's with the electricity that will illuminate it. And I'll show you a nighttime version so you get an idea of kind of what it looks like at night. But this piece houses the ability to point. And then you have this is auto. In this case, this is auto navigation. So this is pointing from the car, how do you get around? And we looked at the font. We had a lot of discussion for ABC options about fonts, about serif fonts, sans serif fonts. Really went back to the drawing board as far as what is the current best practice in regard to legibility, especially for an aging population. And this is the kerning, which is like space around and between letters, and the sort of font that is very legible. And that was the goal. Then we've taken the cupola. This is a bit of a shelf. So as far as this sticks out, this sticks across the top and creates a little bit of a ledge. And then the cupola is actually a steel piece that is flat, just like one piece of steel that is powder coated in the same titanium. And it sits in front of this 3-form material, which is the same that I've passed around, but clear, and embedded within it are historic photos. And that's something that 3-form does really beautifully. And it also gives us the opportunity to work with the Historic Preservation Group to choose these photos so that they can reference them ideally in places in the downtown where you've got that view or you have that historic element. And because of the illumination, this has a bit of glow too with nothing electrified, but with electrification you actually push up into that and then has a glowing edge and it illuminates at night in a real soft, nice way. And then this is 3-form as well. So there's a bead of the yellow along the edge. So if this were to be electrically illuminated, this yellow edge would glow at night as well. And then because this sticks out a bit from the flat panel, the light actually is an LED bead that pushes across. So that's how these letters are illuminated. And then the back is the PED sign. So the map and the PED destinations with walking distances are all here on the back. Again, reference to where it is in the downtown. And then the image that's on top, there's a QR code, and then there's a smaller, true black and white of the image so that you understand what that image is about. There's a little snippet of date and time. And then if you want to use your QR code to find out more information, to go to either Wikipedia or to the Littleton Historical Society photo record, you can find out a little bit more about that piece. So globally, that's kind of where we are. And then it starts to get stepped down and adjusted to be reflective of what we need from a signage and wayfinding standpoint. So if we go from auto pedestrian to destination, we start to see that there are 2 types of destination. One is we're just marking this is the Depot Art Center. So most of the destinations in downtown are like the Depot Arts Center. Here you are at the Depot Arts Center. Here you are at the Town Hall Arts Center. However, where we are tonight is kind of a secondary destination in that Littleton Center captures a couple of places. So it captures administrative offices, council chamber, fire and police. We want to have a little bit more destination information for that type of sign. Not a lot of places in town have that, but they're both scaled and sized and articulated in such a way to be destination signs. Okay, so let me keep going.
A question for you, if I may. So
Yes.
on there where you have the walking times, and is that preferred over distance?
I like walk times because it's not as intimidating sometimes. It's really either or.
Are you easily intimidated?
When it comes to, you've seen my shoes, right? So
yes, it would make a difference.
yes, it makes a huge difference. So if I'm like, oh, it's 10 minutes, right? Everyone understands the concept of 10 minutes, but not everybody understands the concept of like 0.4 miles or a quarter mile, or, especially for kids. Like I have an 11-year-old who is not the world's most let's walk, right? So I'm always like, it's 10 minutes, right? So I think that's my personal preference just from my experience.
Makes sense. Thank you.
No, it's no trouble. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Peggy.
We don't need to decide this now, but I think that's the kind of thing we really want to do some big asking about. I think I raised the issue before, just as you are alluding to. Some people walk much, much faster. Some people have challenges walking, whatever. So for me, that's not nearly as useful. Maybe even distance isn't useful given how far it is downtown anyway. I mean, how long it is. But the distance doesn't seem so helpful to me. I mean, the walking time doesn't seem so helpful.
Well, and we've done a slash, too, where you have the time and you have the distance both. And it just depends on your real estate. We've got plenty of space to do that. It's not like we're retrofitting. I've worked in Colorado Springs where we sort of squished in the walking time, just retrofitting their existing signage, and there wasn't as much real estate there. But we don't have that constraint. We've got the whole back to work with, so I think that's a really good point. Okie dokie. I just blew this up bigger because I was having trouble seeing it on my computer. So here we start to get into that tertiary signage. So one of the things that was very, very important when we talked to Side Street, Alamo Street merchants is this idea of doing a sign that allowed them to buy a blade. So this sign, what the city purchases is everything in the background. So this is the same kind of three-form. This is three-form across the top. The wrap street actually sticks out much in the same way as the cupola does. So it is a steel that sits just a little bit out from the three-form. And then this is a mesh behind because I wanted this one to not have as much visual weight. So this sort of perforated area is just a mesh. And then these blades, and I've made them very generic, but they could have logos, they could have photos. Someone could purchase like 3 blades worth of space and have a larger area to point to their business. But the goal here is a double-sided sign that allows you to point to side streets. So side streets north and south, we're looking principally at Rapp and Curtis, but you can also do this along Prince. Prince has a lot more visibility than some of the side streets heading east. And what I really heard from the merchant community is that's where they're suffering, is on the eastern side streets, east of Prince Street. But this nomenclature came out of those discussions, and it's pretty simple. It's also easily illuminated if you want to do that kind of nighttime illumination. You do the same push across, and then this glows at the top. And then when we get into information and interpretive signs, we've kind of got 3 scenarios. So this agricultural beginnings first one is a lot more storytelling. So we've kind of got 7 key historic narratives in downtown Littleton, and they all kind of have this type of a tagline, like agricultural beginnings, rough and ready mill. I'm forgetting the other ones because it's in one ear and out the other, unless I am looking at it. But the idea here is we've got a couple of places in town where we can tell a linear story, and one of them is the park. that is west of town. So that park where everybody walks through from the light rail station has the ability to have 7 of these along the way that really outline that narrative and that linear progression of history that brings us right up to present day, to the bicentennial time in Littleton. So this piece kind of tells you where you are thematically, and then the interpretive panel can use photographs and narrative and QR code, and then a little bit more on the back. So this is actually a steel panel, so it's not transparent, which means you can double-side it really easily. Now, many of the things in downtown Littleton that we would like to interpret do not have a lot of real estate around them. So the one I've chosen here to use as an example is the Little's House. So Little's House, I mean, it's a very significant piece of architecture. It's a significant piece of Littleton's history. But there's not a lot of space around the house because it is privately owned to tell the story. So we need to put this in the public right-of-way. And so this square column is actually 4-sided. This part glows at night. It has historic photos, narrative, and it's very playful in that as you go around the column, you get a different experience. You can tell a different time and place. And it's engaging, but it doesn't have a big footprint. And then this informational sign, we look for this to tell us more like along the bike path. So as Little's Creek Trail comes along the southern edge of town, it has several really important connections to downtown. And so this is pedestrian scaled. It helps point to that. We've also done them in places where there's some legibility issues that need addressing, but you don't need or can't fit a giant sign. Like that walking distance piece, we usually do in the big auto pedestrian sign, but there are some places where we need to make it a little bit smaller, and that's what that informational sign is. And then the final one, the little one at the top, is a way of looking at the West Main Street and the street signs that hang from wires all throughout downtown. And when we looked at that piece, we were really looking at trying to create something that would be not specific to downtown. So all the rest of these signs, we really said, okay, we want something very specific to downtown. Downtown is unique. It is the heart of the community. But this piece could be more broadly applied throughout Littleton in general, and that's why we actually drew from the stamp and the symbol that is Littleton at large, their symbol. Okay? And this is just a bit of a blow-up of that side street, and this is a bit of a blow-up of the interpretive panels. Okay, so here is a nighttime view, and you can start to see how the red glows. These glow, which are the little arrows that point you. And then this bead is just to reflect that LED is pushing light. And you can see that it's a little bit brighter, then it gets a little bit darker, and then you've got that punch of really bright yellow along the edge. And then you've got the same thing where we're illuminating from the bottom and pushing up, so it's a bit of a gradation from this side. From the side over here, you'd see a white glowing light, which would be really neat because the way that illuminates is the edge glows. And then the back is the exact same, and as the palette progresses down to the secondary and tertiary signs, we're applying the same thing. And the thing I really wanted to point out about the nighttime views is these are great. We don't have to do this everywhere. You don't even have to do it anywhere. But they are a really nice way of, at night, making the signs still be legible and still be vibrant and create something that's a little bit different. Like what is really cool about this palette is that during the day it's very elegant. It's almost refined in the way that the materials come together. And then at night it becomes a lot more funky and a lot more fun. So there is that kind of day and night difference between the two. Now, the other thing that we need to look at that we focused on with you guys is gateways. So how do we take this signage palette and then apply it in a gateway fashion? So we came up with several elements that are transferable. Your gateways are all very different. So the Western Gateway, which is where we meet up with Santa Fe Drive, super different than the Eastern Gateway, where you're right there at the existing sculpture that we have to incorporate, the Year of Sundays. And then north and south, the Northern Gateway feels very much like it is kind of a downtown gateway, but the southern one by Hudson Gardens actually feels more like City of Littleton, whole community. It's very, very large. So there's not really like a cut and dry palette that we could do and just apply everywhere unilaterally. So instead, what we did is develop a series of elements that we can use repetitively as gateways become larger or smaller, that tell that story and refer to the signage. So I'm going to sort of just go left to right. These pieces that have kind of swoops on the poles reflect kind of the swoop that is for Littleton. And these are kinetic, so they actually have a ball-bearing joint, and they can spin this way, back and forth, and then they can loop a little bit around. So they spin very gently, but they have motion, and it's in 2 different dimensions, which is kind of cool. The ones that have that the most successfully, because they are weighted at the bottom, are these that are the solid steel. The mesh ones I would envision to be stationary. So the whole look of it is that some are moving and some are stationary. The movement of the mesh ones actually comes just from you physically moving. So if you're driving in a car, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but mesh shimmers. So as you pass it, it has some visual movement. So the whole idea here is to create something that is gently and vibrantly kinetic. They also have little lights at the top of the poles. Again, do not have to be electrified, but could have that ability to have sort of a smattering of really playful light associated with them. And then as we go into this gateway piece, this is the one that I've designed for the Western Gateway. So that's kind of our template. It's our most challenged gateway from a physical standpoint, also from just the constraints of all the things that come together and conflict there. But the idea here is that we're creating this piece that announces where you are. When Littleton's incorporated, it has a wash of a historic photo. We've picked up the punch from the downtown signage across the bottom. This is that same 3-form material that has silver mount pieces, and the way this illuminates is it glows up from each line. So you've got a stronger light line here, and then it pushes up. And then we've got, again, like a bead that pushes light up for the swoops. And this is just a punch. So we're going to illuminate it from behind, but this is basically just the absence of material where it says downtown Littleton. So it's just clear. And the same for here. It's not even clear. It's open, right? I'm not articulating that very well. And then we've got an artifact of this just so that we could pool some of the 3-form if we need more physical space in certain areas. But what's really delightful here, and the way it worked out with the Western Gateway and the Northern Gateway, is that we have the ability to invite people into this gateway. So it's not just something that you're looking at. We're actually pulling the walkway through, and we're creating better plaza space all around. So I think the best way, sorry, I keep thinking this will advance my computer. Okay, so this is kind of that Western Gateway. We're looking east. And you guys may not recognize it, but there are actually 5 lanes of traffic. So this is the one that's swooping really dramatically around. This one's going straight. This one's going straight, and these 2 are turning, right? So these people are heading west. If you're heading east, you've only got the 2 lanes. Toast is over here, okay? And the melting pot is actually over here. So this is a to-scale drawing. So I apologize because I did want to sort of put the buildings in the background. I think they would have helped give you some scale, but I ran out of time. So that's I'm hoping that you can picture the width as being accurate because it is an accurate width. Now, what we've done is this plaza space, we've kept the sacred tree, right? But we've removed some of the plant material, we've graded it back, and we've created a more successful pedestrian connection across that intersection. So as you're crossing this way, the turn there makes for a lot of physical challenges. So we really wanted to pull this back, create more of a plaza space. And echoing that, my recommendation would be that you'd actually take concrete out throughout this kind of gateway snippet area, and you'd replace it with pavers. So it would be like a plaza space, so you'd still have raised curbs, but the pavement itself would feel very much like a plaza. We'd lose the center median for most of it, and we'd just do bollards, and then this actually comes where the tree planter is, and it's in front of that. The planter itself is going to go away and be more reflective of this kind of materiality, so we can protect the roots. But the idea here is this is glowing, these are glowing in their way, and we've created this sense of entry utilizing what we've got on the Western Gateway, because this is very far back. It's not like it's right here, and I think that that's important to recognize too. This is uphill and far back. So in order to make this gateway really successful, we needed to bring it down. And part of that is everything that you see here, but the other part of that is actually addressing the ground plane so that it feels like you're entering something very different even if you're driving. So driving over pavers feels incredibly different than driving over asphalt. It's also a lot easier to retrofit because you can saw cut the asphalt, apply this, and then you can start to look at some of the things that also aren't working from a traffic engineering standpoint. So as you are getting to this place on Main Street, right in front of the melting pot, you're making a giant curve. You're making that curve very fast. So from a traffic engineering standpoint, we'd really like to do either a PED-activated signal or a stop right before, like right across from Rick Asker's place in the feed shop, just south. Do a stop there, and that's where your pavement begins. And then you don't have the speedway effect of people coming around here with all the momentum of that very long last block of Main, which I think from a safety standpoint is really important. So globally, this is what the Western Gateway looks like. Specifically, these elements then we pulled into all the other gateways. So if you kind of look at the northern one, we've got a real opportunity to again pull back the grade, actually create a plaza space as you are coming across Santa Fe Drive. So right now you come across Santa Fe Drive, there's a little pedestrian pork chop, then you come across to a sidewalk that's only about like 4 or 5 feet wide. So we're going to push that way back so you actually have a little plaza space there, retain the trees, but grade up to them rather than have that brick planter, and then actually take a walkway through those trees behind and then hook up to the sidewalk. So you've got a really attractive way to enter on foot, because the trail that's across Santa Fe there gets heavy use, and there's actually a lot of people that bike and walk and enter downtown at that gateway. And then the southern one is a looky, not touchy type gateway. So it's really just taking advantage of really looking at these kinetic pieces and scattering them, and then doing 1 or 2 of the signs, but not needing to have the separate walk place because it's not a walkable gateway. And then on the other end, on the eastern gateway, really utilizing this downtown icon on the bridges and on either side so that you get this sense that you are entering downtown from the east. Okay. And from a... Okay, so wait, before I go on, are there questions, or let's talk about the gateways?
Had we thought at all about having a gateway at the light rail station?
Yeah, I have.
And would you use banners and those kinds of things? Would it look kind of like that?
So the secondary gateways, that's what I call them, along Prince Street, right? So as you're coming north and south on Prince Street, right at the light rail station, right kind of where that creek comes, where the trail comes in, that's sort of your gateway to entering downtown. And I would put, frankly, you don't need all of these kinds of elements. You really just need planting and the auto pedestrian signage.
And I'm thinking about the pedestrians coming up from the light rail themselves, visiting Littleton for the first time or choosing to return.
Yeah, the signage that I have there is the auto pedestrian. No, it's double pedestrian, and then there's the interpretive signage. And there's 2 types of that. So the column is there to interpret the station itself, and then there is a bit of a history interpretive piece as you're encouraging people along that walkway.
Thank you.
So I had to think about it. But, so I'm going to go on, because So if you head north on Prince, then that next block after Spur Coffee, after Reinke, if you look at the traffic speeds as people are driving north, they floor it after that intersection because it looks big and wide and it looks like downtown's done. In the same fashion as people are coming north to south, they are trying to catch the light and they are speeding up right there. You really need to extend that sense of downtown street at least one block north, do bump outs, narrow that. Your drive lanes there are incredibly wide, unnecessarily so. You have the ability to do those bulb outs at the next intersection, which is like you can see the circumference of the earth. It's really, really wide. So part of what we did for this project is a little bit of bleed into just making those recommendations because as I dug in, as I started to look, those came out. So they're part of what we're delivering for this project. It's kind of a take it or leave it. It's my opinion, but I do think that from an urban design standpoint, you've got some secondary gateways that are going to serve you really, really well if they're improved. Okay. I am talking a lot. I'm going to go faster. I'm sorry. Okay, this is one of my favorite pieces. Okay, so in addition to the signage, we've also got this furnishings palette, okay? And what I wanted to achieve with the furnishings palette is two things. I wanted to reference the signage, so keep some of that angularity of the sign, but soften it like it's been sunk, and do something that is totally unique, very contemporary, but elegant, right? Which is kind of what I've heard from the outreach that I've done. So this bench is called a Maggie bench. It's made by Landscape Forms. They make the Scarborough bench that you have downtown right now, which is the woven bench. They're a very reputable company. They stand behind their products. They're really the best. It's like the fact that you already have it. I talked to Charlie. He likes it. It's a good company. That bench has not given him hassle. And none of their stuff ever gives anybody hassle. So the beauty of this bench is that, and I want to go to the next picture, the scale is such that it's very relaxing and accommodating for sitting. So if you get a sense of where this lady is, she's sitting back. This is tilted back, so you really are nestled into the bench. And then if you get a perception of the height, it's really at shoulder height. So if you're a big person, it's comfortable. If you're kids, it's comfortable. It really does feel a little bit more like home furniture in its comfort level. So my issue with downtown benches is that they don't always feel very inviting for long periods of sitting or sometimes even short periods of sitting. So the idea here is that I wanted to create something that didn't have like a heavy feel but had a very comfortable, inviting sense of itself. And then I've worked with Landscape Forms. There's a perforation along the bottom of the bench. It's mostly so you don't get water and sit in water. If you've ever had wet butt like me, this is a real benefit. But I've talked to them about doing this in the square punch that we've got in the signage palette, which they absolutely will do, and the upcharge is really not that much. So I feel like that would be the only thing that I would change about this. And then they love this gold, but I would do it in the titanium because the titanium is going to match up to the signs, and it's also rich. It has a real sense of depth with just that little bit of metallic, and it's not going to show dirt. So if you've ever had sort of a dark gray silver metallic car, you know that they're not going to show dirt the way like a black or a white car would. Now, as we get into the other palette options, I tried to create something that, the bench is sort of the first big thing that you choose. That's what people really see. I love trash, right? These trash things are actually just the most gorgeous trash receptacle ever, in my opinion. But they've done the same thing where they can do the square punch in the bottom of the trash. What I wanted to achieve with trash is not have the flat top with the trash right now is a dirt and dust collector. It's also a place where people have the tendency to put like a soda can if they're being like lazy. So this has a dome top. It's kind of hard to see in that picture, but it prevents people from putting something on it because it would fall off. And then it's actually a PVC instead of a metallic. So it's a polycarbonate. It's very long lasting. It actually, in performance tests, lasts as long as steel or aluminum. But it has like a bit of a grit to the surface that really hides the dirt, which I thought was really important because I didn't want, it's just such a shame when trash looks dirty, right? The point of trash is to keep it corralled and clean. And that's why I did a side load. So in trash, there's like you put it in the top or you put it in the side. One really good thing about the current trash is that it's side load, which means that it doesn't collect water, it doesn't collect snow, and it's pretty easy to change out. The bike racks are also that kind of soft, modernized, with also looking like a bike rack. So in the last 10 years, people have gone kind of crazy with bike racks, which I love. I love art as bike racks. You guys have art at bike racks in the downtown. But the trouble with art bike racks is people don't recognize them as bike racks. They think they're art. And then you're not getting to the point of encouraging biking, which is really what you'd like to do as a community for health. It also increases mobility, helps with parking issues, etc. So this bike rack looks like a bike rack. And it also looks like everything else in the palette, which I thought was really important. And then finally, the planter palette, which is, again, probably not in the titanium. I'd like to go a softer color, a more bisque or a platinum. They're in 3 different sizes, and the sizes have to do with squares and rectangles, but also height. And this has a very discrete profile, and I thought that that was really important because my goal with this project, with the signage, with the streetscape, is to create something really beautiful in downtown. More than anything else that you can put in, this is going to totally transform the look and feel of being downtown. But downtown eventually may change. You may redo the street. You may have more space. These are designed in such a way, because of their modularity and because of their slim profile, that they'll fit everywhere right now. They'll fit on Alamo. They'll certainly fit on Main Street. They'll fit on the side streets. So you're not suffering from places that won't be able to have planters because there's not enough physical space. And that's achieved just through the design and through the height and through the dimensioning. The other thing that I really like about these planters is they come, you can specify them with punch holes in the bottom. And again, looking to the future, if you were to redo a street, you would do internal irrigation. So you'd run your irrigation line to the planters, then you'd pop that punch and you'd put it up through so you've got a drip in there and you don't have to hand irrigate. In the interim, you're going to have to hand irrigate, but you just don't do that punch so that you don't have a weep hole, and then they work really great. And these, again, all of these products are like 20 to 30-year lifespans. They have an elegance. They look thin, if that makes sense, but they're not. The bench weighs 300 pounds. It's not going anywhere. It's super durable, and I think that that's really important.
So where are you envisioning those?
Well, these go at the intersections. So they go associated with, if you know where the benches are now, they're kind of in the bulb outs where it gets bigger. The benches kind of sit at an angle, and these go next to the bench right now. Like as you, I would say you could put them in the bulb out, so there's space. If you're looking at a bulb out that goes like this, and here's where you're crossing, there's like a sweet spot where most communities find these planters to be the most successful, and it's right at the edge of the bulb out. But that's if you've got a raised bulb out that actually has directional ramps that point you across, which is frankly the standard. That's where you're supposed to be. The flat bulb out that sort of goes down to nothing makes it really easy for cars to hit you at the intersection. It also makes it really challenging for people with visual impairment to find that sight line. So if you're using a cane, you actually use that sloped ramp to point you in the direction that you need to go to your receiving side. So we're moving away from that kind of flat piece.
So I have a question for Charlie. So when we have, for example, Candlelight Walk, and we have 17,000 people crowded all over the place downtown, what does that do for navigation and safety?
First time I've seen this, I couldn't address that now.
Okay, so that's something that I think we need to think, and other events where we have not quite that many.
If I can jump in, I think that I mean, these are not out of the ordinary in downtown. Similar to earlier conversation, we would address the location. We're looking at a larger streetscape, but operationally, we can make this work.
Thank you.
Yeah, Peggy, they're really small, 15 inches for the tall
Well,
one.
no, that's part of my concern is people falling over them because they're small.
Well, you never put just one. So, like, design rule is like you never have a single planter. They're always grouped in this really pleasing 2 to 3, so that you kind of create like a ganged little area of planters. Just because it looks better, you get the height variation. And you can even see here the way they've planted the potato plant and then the hanging. It just gives it a lot more visual interest.
Thank you.
It's a good question. I don't want to trip over planters. Okay. Any other questions? What do you guys think of the palette? I guess maybe that's the next part, isn't it? Okay, so my next steps are just the final document. So working with staff to refine the final cost estimate, making sure that we document the process in a beautiful book so that you've got that for the longevity, but also looking to get it in because it's a really hard-won palette. It's also a really beautiful palette. I'm super pleased with the way people have helped me shape it, and it's come together in a way that is pretty seamless, which I always say is indicative of a really nice process. So let me go back, and I can answer any questions that you guys have about anything.
This is probably for Michael. This is geared towards the downtown.
Correct.
Are there plans to push it outside of that? So, for example, we have a gateway at Broadway and County Line, and we've got the brick planters that have, it says City of Littleton in their old style, and it's too small.
The goal would be to update all of the entrance signs with the design that you've seen. Yeah, there's not a push to extend the materials for the downtown, the benches, et cetera, beyond the downtown, but the entry features, yes, for all of them.
Okay.
Bruce? Well, I think I like it. I mean, I think it's very creative. I think it's addressing a lot of the issues we've talked about for a long period of time in a lot of different ways. Obviously, so I think you're starting to talk about the next steps, but there's going to be some more. What is your guys' envisioning of the, this gets into the budget discussion, and then so hypothetically, when would you speculate this would start to maybe go forward if everybody was in agreement?
Next year, as part of the 2015 budget. There might be some things we can do this year, but primarily we need to know the council supports it through the budget process.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Another question. So this is adding signage in places where there isn't signage. Number one question is what if anything down there will it remove? Mm-hmm. And number two, you've been talking to the merchants and all of that. So are they looking at some of this signage directing to their shops as a way to replace their sandwich boards out there too?
Yeah, there's a growing awareness that there's not a love at the city level of all of the sandwich boards. So they're concerned that they're going to go away and they want a place to replace them with. So there are sandwich boards that actually people have put at the corners where the signage would be that allows for a more formalized way of pointing to the side street stuff. I will say that, the sandwich boards themselves I don't find offensive. It's just how different they are. I think a lot of businesses really rely on the visibility of a sandwich board. So if you were to develop like a palette for the sandwich boards that people could buy and they could personalize for their shop, but overall they'd be of a dimension and a scale that's acceptable. I'm not, personally I'm not against sandwich boards.
Let me be more direct. It's a trade-off. Part of what we're doing, the council obviously controls the right-of-way and will make the decision and has chosen to allow those sandwich board signs. I firmly believe that the reason we are doing the wayfinding side streets is to allow those businesses And part of what the council will have to decide is what language will you allow? I mean, part of what you heard was you could buy multiple spaces of it. You will have to amend the sign code to allow off-premise signage. And so we will have an entire discussion about what is allowed, similar to our discussion around the South Platte Park. Is it names of businesses, or is it the type of business that's there? Is it a restaurant? Can I say what the name is? What level of detail? How much text can I put? So that's a whole separate conversation. But we are doing an RFP for the full streetscape, right-of-way to right-of-way within this area, because you heard, I mean, we have bike, art, and not necessarily used as for parking and locking my bike. And so really, if you will allow me, cleaning up the right-of-way and reintroducing a new streetscape plan is part of what we need to do. But I would, again, council controls the right-of-way, so it will be your decision. Code, there will be ordinance requirements, changes required in order to allow this to happen. But I think it is a removal and a cleanup and a replacement of the vision of what council has through the work that you've seen tonight.
Bruce?
Just talking about the benches that we're looking at there, are those capable of being placed against a wall also, or are they better designed to be 360 access?
Oh, no, you can place them against a wall. I mean, they have a cant to the back, so they wouldn't sit flat against a wall. But yeah, I mean, you often see that in downtowns where the bench is actually either against the building or it's like against the curb facing the building. So yes, in short.
And can you get a smaller version of that bench? And what I'm thinking of is we have businesses now that are placing, you know, arbitrary benches outside their business. It's great that they have a bench outside there, but hopefully we could, as we're saying, standardize. I'm just looking at that design, and I'm wondering if it's compact enough to work within the storefront spaces we have.
Yeah, it does look a little longer in this picture. It's 78 inches long for the one that I've specified as the most common bench. It can also go up to 114 inches, which is very large. It's 9 feet. So I've taken into consideration the fact that the right-of-way does have some constraints, even though it is wide, at least on Main Street. And so I've specified the bench that fits. But if you want to go big, there are areas where we can do that larger bench.
I think he's actually asking if we can go smaller.
I'd like to go. I'd like to go small along Main Street,
Yeah,
so it fits. But you know, if we stuck them in Bega Park, that's a different sense there.
Yeah, it is. It's smaller than it looks.
Questions?
What are we doing then with the Sunday's sculpture? Month of
Nothing.
Sundays? So we're not doing anything with that? We're leaving it where it is?
Yes.
So,
We haven't made any
We
decisions.
looked, over the years, we have looked at moving that thing, and
Well, I
it
know,
is
but I just-
very expensive
no,
to move.
I know. I thought last time we were talking, some folks wanted to move it, and I didn't want to move it. So I just wanted to make sure I was hearing what we're saying about that. But
The way I've designed the gateway, Peggy, is not to move it. But if there's a future pull to move it, there's a really nice way to use that downtown pillar. So I've put the downtown pillars on the eastern gateway at the ends of the bridge. So they almost become like part of that bridge. And then the smaller signs are actually on either side. And you do have a little bit of an ability to walk through because the new trail is coming there. And so they kind of wraps around in a really pleasant way. But the Sundays, the year of Sundays, the only recommendation I've made is to plant something behind it that is more like a pampas grass so that there's something more yellow because it's green and the trees are green.
okay.
So you can't really see it.
And were you considering at all, because when we did our walkabout, we talked about it, having some bronze sculptures located at various places?
The little swoopy-doos, because they're kinetic.
Well, no, but I know those, the swoopy-doos, but
Sorry, that's my
more classic sculptures.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
And I would say that they are not going to do the image making that like a more contemporary piece would do for downtown.
Okay,
So I think, you know.
The one thing I don't like is the swoopy-doos. Sorry. And that's me, but, so I'd love to hear feedback from citizens or whoever. I think a lot of these components are really attractive, but the swoopy-doos don't do they do something negative for me anyway, but that's me, so. I mean, and I like the kinetic idea, but the swoopy-doos aren't speaking to me. Well, they're yelling at me or something.
Something.
Randy?
Well, just to stay at kind of a high level here rather than trying to mine down to the shape and size of each individual, I think it's a very elegant and very professional way of decluttering our downtown. Speaking personally, I've been on kind of record as trying to do that, and whether we're talking about the sandwich boards or the A-frames or whatever you want to call it, I know that obviously some of the merchants are a little disappointed in some of their ability or inability to display some of their wares in certain ways. This is, I think, going to be a gift that we can give to them to help them at a very, very high level showcase, locationally how to get there. And of course, we've talked a little bit about doing this down on the Platte and the Mary Carter, and that's
right.
Probably a product for a different discussion, but I'm super excited.
Mm-hmm.
It is a gift of the taxpayers, not a gift from us.
Deb?
Well, I think that you've done an incredible job. I think that the depth and the thoroughness that you've covered this, even the thoughtfulness on the types of materials and stuff, and I like the lighting, the way that you've got the lighting and how you took those original 3 concepts and then pulled them into this. I think this is something that not only does it accomplish all of those goals you set out to in the beginning, but it does have some, I can see it still working in 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that in those regards, it definitely meets the goals. I think that the one visual I can't grasp is the entrance into the west entrance. I can't, and I'm a pretty visual person, but this I can't.
Well, it's so wide. I mean, it's difficult in this format. And like I said, every gateway is different. So, I mean, as we get to the final plan, I think putting it in plan view is going to be the thing, marrying that version of elevation and plan, and perhaps even just going from a photograph and placing it in a SketchUp kind of way, because it's super hard. I can see it, but it's been difficult to convey. For what that's worth, it's not just you. My partner, Paul, is also like, what? So, yeah, but it's.
Yeah.
I think that gateway is such a downer, and I really do feel that if given the lifespan, I mean, there's a lot of coming up of the sort of rubble rock that's at the bottom. The fountain is not functional. I mean, it's definitely a bigger look than just signage. But I think, as you're looking into a streetscape project, just kind of taking these threads and saying, okay, thinking about this comprehensively. There's also a lot of wasted asphalt space there. So as you're coming around the corner in front of the melting pot, there's like 12 to 15 feet of asphalt that cars do not drive in and is not required to be there for cars. It really should be taken back to people space and be a sidewalk area that's more like a plaza. So you're stopping cars there, then you're receiving them at that plaza. You've got a really nice terminus to Main rather than just kind of, you're always looking for the curve right now.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I would just
Get close to the mic, Deb.
mention,
Close to your mic.
The only other thing I would mention is that on Prince, and this is probably a little longer term, and this is probably part of Charlie, but you had talked about that there's kind of a big runway there.
There is.
But there's not a bike lane. So maybe where we have some of those areas, there may be a way to put a bike lane in there, because downtown has a bike lane coming into it, but it really, once you get down there, you got to be on the sidewalks on your bike, and that's not even a good idea. So I think we have to keep that very top of mind. I would also then, and I'm not trying to micromanage your process, what you did here, but on some of these where, and I love the walk. I love saying how long it takes to walk. Sorry, Peggy. But I think people live more in a 5-minute, 10-minute than 1 mile, 2 mile. A lot of people don't even know how long 2 miles would take to walk.
Yeah.
So even if you did both of them, I do like having that time-wise. And I've seen that in other places too, and it just it makes it more doable, I think. Oh, it's only 10 minutes. So we got time for that, right? So is also then to maybe have a little bike symbol and maybe help direct people to a bike path or a bike safe place, or and because I just think we need to, that's got to be part of everything we do downtown. We have to consider that aspect of transportation too, because they're down there.
Oh, no, they are. Last weekend I saw a family with a little buggy, and there are sharrows on Prince, so they were coming north on Prince, but they weren't sure where to go, so they stopped in front of the little restaurant that's on like the northeast corner, and they were figuring that out. Like the sharrow becomes kind of in the turn lane at that point, and they weren't sure if they should keep going. So I do think legibility for all modes of transport is really, really important.
And if we're going to push people up from the trail into downtown and they're on their bikes, then it's got that same ability to feel safe on your bike on the trail has to transcend when they come up here too.
I completely concur.
Kristen, I'll use one last comment, which is understand the gateway when you're coming from the west, but how does that also work from folks coming from the north or south along Santa Fe, and making sure that it's visible on that. And I'll just leave it with that. Thank you so much, and look forward to your final report.
Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it.
And council, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have Tracy.
You're right, that is a good point you're making. Because you see it from the west, but not so much, unless you're looking.
so she's gonna, I told her to ask Charlie about the experiences that we're having doing some of that. So we wouldn't have the expensive wagon.
That's okay.
If we wanted to do that.
I've got my idea on roundabout, so, another place, too, so.
Solar might have to be adjacent.
Debbie was saying, no, probably not a good idea. That's probably
She said, you know what it is, it might
it right
go
in there.
down right along the side.
somewhere else.
And possibly across the top, depending. But
Wait a second.
anyway, she's gonna,
You know, that'd be really cool for a little demonstration project for how well solar
yeah,
can work for something like that too. Everybody walk by and see it,
because it doesn't take much to do the kind of lighting.
especially if it's LEDs.
Because we've done, I think Charlie has stuff in the parking lot that's using some solar.
No. Okay, if everyone could take their seats, please. And for council, reminder that we have a breakfast tomorrow morning at 7:30. So we have the marketing folks that we're meeting with, so that if we do end later this evening, I don't forget to mention that to folks, so.
And it's upstairs.
And it's
It's in the police building.
cops, right, in the cops' room. Okay? And Tracy's been before us before, so
Hello.
it's good to have you back again, neighbor. And we'll turn it over to you, and we'll have some fun.
Great, great. Well, thank you for having me back again. My name is Tracy Huggins. I'm the Executive Director of the Denver Urban Renewal Authority. And when we last spoke, we spent a fair amount of time just thinking about the role of the Urban Renewal Authority, the process that is involved in not only setting the urban renewal area, but then undertaking projects. And this time, wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how Denver has been able, once there is a vision in place, to implement that vision. And I'm going to talk for a little bit just about some smaller projects as well as some larger projects. And hopefully this will spur the continued thinking about how you might be wanting to address the various urban redevelopment areas that you already have in place. As I go through, please feel free to interrupt me with questions or comments. So just as a reminder, I'll click through these very, very quickly. We talked at the last session that we had about the roles of the public sector, the development community, the capital markets. I really want to, again, focus on the role of the public sector, the importance of setting that vision for the overall city and the role that the redevelopment authority can play in bringing forward projects that support that vision. The development community is always anxious, or sometimes anxious, I shouldn't say always, frequently anxious to be the builder to facilitate that plan. But again, in those instances where the plan and the development community can't bring together the capital market resources necessary, that's then where there is the need for tax increment financing. We also talked a little bit about how these projects can address the challenges that the respective urban renewal areas may be presenting, addressing market failures, acting as a market catalyst, bringing development along more quickly than it otherwise would be looking to be undertaken, as well as enhancing market outcomes. All of this then brings forward the public revenues that are used to finance these projects through the public sector. So I could not recall if we talked about guiding principles or not, but I think that these are really important, particularly at a time when there is a great deal of scrutiny that is being put on the use of tax increment financing, and is that tool really being used to achieve the outcomes that I've just outlined. So these are several guiding principles that I would ask you to consider as you are looking at the urban renewal projects and the use of tax increment. And the first one is to undertake critical projects that would not occur without public investment or involvement. There will be projects that are presented to you that say they need public assistance, public investment, Not every project that suggests that they do need that actually does. Don't be afraid to say no to a project. Make sure you do the appropriate underwriting to make sure that but for the investment, the project wouldn't happen. Along those same lines, allow the markets to work when possible. I think one of the biggest challenges that we can run into is when we are trying to force a market outcome that just doesn't want to happen. I think there's a difference between encouraging it, consistent with that plan, and that's where I think and we'll talk a little bit about the planning efforts, are so important to make sure that this is an area where that type of development will work, and then bringing the tools forward to allow that to happen, as opposed to forcing an outcome in an area that just isn't ripe for it. It may not be ripe at that moment. It may never be ripe for it. So listen to the markets, the developers and the lenders, those that are putting their resources will speak very loudly to this. They won't want to make that investment. There's too much risk involved. And when you start seeing your investment edge above 35%, not saying that that's a maximum amount, but when you start getting more and more of the public money and less therefore of the private investment, the market isn't working as hard as it wants to, or perhaps it's telling you that this is a place where you should not be directing that type of development investment. Promote public participation. I probably would not have emphasized this as much as I do right now 22 years ago when we were first starting, because we weren't very good at public participation. We felt that these were areas that were so challenged that between ourselves and the development community, we could figure out what was best, and we learned very quickly that we don't know best. And it really is important to engage the community, make sure that there is awareness. They can help guide that development outcome in ways that you may not consider. They are the feet on the ground. They are there living every single day. And while they frequently can be reluctant to change, the input that they can provide as far as how best to manage the change that comes along with urban redevelopment is really vital. So talk to the community early and often. And then seek to minimize the impact on the other taxing entities. When we spoke last, the state legislature was still in session. There was a bill that ended up passing the legislature that really was focused on this issue. The counties continue to have a great deal of concern about the municipality's ability to capture the revenues that would otherwise go to them, the lack of participation that the counties feel they are able to enjoy as a result of this process, and that piece of legislation did pass the legislature. It was, however, ultimately vetoed by Governor Hickenlooper. So that piece of legislation is dead. That doesn't mean the issue is over. Really pay attention to why the counties are concerned, why the school districts are concerned. And you can minimize that impact by always seeking to minimize the public investment and seeking to repay it as quickly as possible. So all of these things, when you take that, all really work together. Important projects, you are going to get the community support when it is a project that really furthers other city plans. The market, make sure that it is working as hard as you can, minimize that tax income and investment. Make sure you listen to the community to gain their understanding and expectations regarding the process. And in doing that, there's the natural result of minimizing that impact on the other taxing entities. Did we talk about this process when I was here before? That looked like a familiar slide? Okay, so we'll just click through this again super quickly. The idea, the underwriting, we've talked about the importance of that but-for analysis, making sure that the investment is the lesser of three. What is the real financing gap? What are the eligible costs? Is there enough TIF capacity to repay the gap that's identified? The various documents that need to be put in place, and then the approvals that occur through the process as well. Again, just a primer on TIF. We have talked about this before. So I don't even think we need to touch this. Some of this is just for others who might be watching. later. So with the tools in place, how do we put them to work? So you've heard me mention a number of times the importance of establishing a vision, having a plan. And my experience with using tax increment financing in urban renewal goes back to the early 90s, where downtown Denver, if it wasn't dead, it was dying. We were losing all of our retail. No one lived downtown. And the economic circumstance that created was of real concern to the city. And so then Mayor Wellington Webb, in coordination with the city council, and this is important. This was a time where, and this hasn't happened a whole lot with us, where both the administration and the city council were absolutely in lockstep about the importance of trying to figure out how to address the challenges of downtown. So Mayor Webb convened the Downtown Denver Economic Summit that included a whole host of stakeholders to really talk about all of the challenges that downtown was experiencing, but also look for the continuing opportunities that it held forward. The result of that was the downtown agenda, and I think one of the things that made the implementation of the downtown agenda as straightforward as it wasn't trying to be everything. It really boiled itself down to three basic components. Housing. They wanted downtown to be a neighborhood, so let's do what we can to bring housing, and in particular workforce housing, downtown. We needed to bring retail back. Retail in Colorado generates the sales tax. That's what fuels virtually all of our budgets. We needed to have retail back downtown, as well as the promotion of tourism. We had just started the construction of the Colorado Convention Center, and if we didn't have a mechanism to make sure that people came to our city to use the convention center, it was going to be a flawed process. So it was fairly straightforward. Housing, retail, support tourism.
Can I ask a question? Did you think about at all the pros and cons of non-retail business, such as offices, maybe a mixed use involving offices or businesses, but they weren't going to be retail? And what was your thought there?
Yes. So at this time, the downtown office market was really quite strong on 17th Street. So, and downtown Denver has real clear corridors within it, where you have the performing arts complex along 14th. 15th is still sort of trying to figure out what it is. Then you have the 16th Street Mall, you have 17th and 18th that really are the business corridors. And a lot of it is the trade-off, again, on the taxes. So when you have the commercial properties, as long as your office vacancy is fairly low, being assessed at 29%, that can be a strong a strong property tax generator. The same is going to be true with the retail, but when you look at Denver's budget, they rely a whole lot more on sales tax than they do on property tax. So it really was that balance, wanting to make sure that downtown had all of those components and not tilted too far in one direction or the other.
And I think where we're in that same boat. Our property tax is small enough that primary job creation is great from a regional standpoint, doesn't help our budget a whole lot.
One of the things, and I recall, because I worked downtown Denver at the time, one of the things I recall that the retail, the struggle with the retail is that once the office workers went home, there was no one.
That's right.
And so bringing in the housing then helps to change that dynamic. We have a little bit of that here too. What happens is that even though we do get an influx of new people in the evening for dining experiences, etc., all our shops are closed. So
yeah, and it has taken time for the retailers downtown to extend their hours, because you are absolutely right. That was a real issue.
So have they're extended, they stayed open late? Okay.
Yeah, yep. But you needed to get that critical mass of retail to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So the first project that we undertook downtown, and I absolutely believe this was a make it or break it for the Urban Renewal Authority. This was our first use of tax increment financing on a behemoth of a building, as you can see. that was threatened with demolition. It was held in high regard by a lot of people in Denver because of the history that it had. A number of people still, maybe you, went to the tea room and enjoyed the Denver Dry Goods building. And so we, the Urban Renewal Authority, procured a loan from the city, from other banks. We bought the building. That is a step that we have avoided from that point forward. We have found we are really not very good at being property owners, but we had to because it was going to be demolished. So we bought the building and then undertook to develop a plan to redevelop it. It ended up actually having all of those three components included in it, those three prongs of the plan. So included in this building is apartments that are affordable, and they are affordable at 60% of the area median income, all except for 12 of the 52 units. We have for sale condos. We have retail. The retail has changed over time. TJ Maxx was one of the original tenants. It is still in that building. Some of the other retailers have moved. And we support the convention industry in that the offices of Visit Denver, our Convention and Visitors Bureau, are in this building as well, and our offices are there as well. So it, like I said, it really addressed all of those components of the plan, and it helped indicate to the rest of the market that you can, in fact, make an investment in downtown Denver. I absolutely believe had we not been successful with this project, which took the better part of 10 years to finally get all of the pieces in place, that many of the other projects that we saw downtown would not have followed along. The other thing that I will just mention very, very quickly, historic preservation has been a mainstay of our redevelopment efforts currently. I think I talked before about how we weren't very mindful of historic preservation in the 70s and 80s. Now, much, much, much more mindful of that. Retail. People forget that Denver Pavilions was not that long ago 2 surface parking lots right in the heart of downtown. This was a huge undertaking. Downtown is challenged by virtue of the Cherry Creek Mall and a number of radius restrictions that are in place on the retailers there. We just will never be able to get the same retailers that the mall has downtown, in large part because of that. So it was a very important project for us to be able to redevelop these 2 surface parking lots into the 350,000 square foot entertainment and retail complex that is there today. It has had its sort of fits and starts. The 3rd floor continues to be a bit of a challenge to lease, but I do think that they've figured out a number of ways to address that. Our investment was focused primarily on the construction of the 800 underground parking spaces because in downtown you can see those parking lots were there and they were being used, and so taking that away was going to have a negative impact on the office users as well as others in that general area. When pavilions came online, that's when we started to begin to have enough synergy from a retail standpoint to allow for those expanded hours. Mercantile Square is, again, another smaller project that we undertook downtown. This is down in Lodo. We don't take credit for virtually anything related to Lodo. We have very limited investment in lower downtown. A lot of that development that occurred down there really was spawned by the investment in Coors Field as well as in the Pepsi Center. We did play a role in the Pepsi Center, but not in Coors Field. But there were a couple of projects that we did participate in Mercantile Square. And again, you can see heavy emphasis on the housing piece, in particular the affordable housing. This is home to the Chattered Cover Bookstore in lower downtown as well. And again, part of our role was to help with the parking related to that. Just from and I'll use this one as a moment, so you can see we've put on here what the total project cost and what our investment was. And these were early projects downtown. So in this one, we issued $4 million in bonds. There were $3.2 million that was net after you funded reserves and capitalized interest against a total project cost of just under $21 million. So you can see that we're in there for just about just under 25%. Rio Grande building, another example of historic preservation and adaptive reuse, bringing forward the residential. One thing I will comment about on the projects that we've undertaken downtown is the residential component has, across the board, been very, very, very successful. Ground floor retail has not necessarily experienced the same level of success. If you're right on the 16th Street Mall, pretty good. If you are on this project even half a block off, it can be really challenging to attract the ground floor retail. So as you're thinking about some of your other areas, the importance of that pedestrian traffic, ease of access can really make a huge amount of difference as you're looking at that ground level activation.
You're showing us each of these individual buildings. Was the urban renewal area the confines of that building, or did it, tell me a little bit about how far it went to each side, just in general?
Sure. So this started with a 15-block urban renewal area that was later expanded several years later to 52 blocks. So much of downtown Denver is in an urban renewal area. We then, on these projects, and I'll back up a little bit, and I apologize that I didn't anticipate that question and bring a map that would be very helpful with that. So the 15 blocks would have included the Denver Drive project, Denver Pavilions, and just up the mall is also the Adams Mark Hotel. It's now the Sheraton. That was in a 15-block urban renewal area and property tax increment area. So we set a property tax increment area for those 15 blocks. We then went back and amended the urban renewal plan to add island sales tax increment areas for each of those projects. These projects, so Denver Drive Pavilions, what is now the Sheraton Mercantile Square, were all financed from one bond issuance that Dura had put out into the market in '89. We just broke that bond out of escrow as each piece was necessary. Other projects, such as the Rio Grande, that is in the 52-block urban renewal area, but it has an island sales and property tax increment area. So we have a number of island TIF areas within a larger urban renewal area. Yes, sir.
How does that work then from the standpoint of if you guys approved the 15 block and then later expanded it, does the clock, the 25-year clock, run on the entire quote-unquote 52 blocks, or is it just the islands whenever you approve the plan?
Because an urban renewal area doesn't have a statutory term. The tax increment area does. And that's where, in looking to set the urban renewal area, it can be much larger to then have projects be undertaken within it, and then you can work to set the 25-year clock to start with each project.
When you've got a developer ready to...
Right, right.
So when you're saying tax island, that's what you're saying. This area was defined, the clock starts ticking on the 25-year TIF for that limited space.
Right.
And just down the road could be another island with a completely different clock.
That's correct. That is correct. That is correct.
And you get to pick when that clock starts.
Right. Well, and then just a follow-on question. So within that area, let's say there was a recently done business that's doing very well and is not interested in what you're doing as far as the urban renewal goes. They have everything just fine. Mm-hmm. What was the interaction that you had with them? Because now they are included in an urban renewal area. Did they see it as a benefit, or did they see it as a liability?
Yes.
Yeah.
And really that is all joking aside, that is true when you set the larger urban renewal areas. We recently, 2 years ago, established a corridor-long urban renewal area along Welton. And I think maybe we talked about this in the 5 Points.
You did, and I want to hear it again. Yeah.
And you had, property owners that ran every bit of that spectrum from, gosh, where have you been for the last 15 years? We have been waiting for this tool to come in. Even though tax increment was not approved, we are just getting ready to approve our first tax increment supported project, so setting that first island along that corridor. We had others who were really uncomfortable with the prospect of the even being included in the urban renewal area. One, because of the threat of eminent domain. So what we did in that plan was to not, how can I say this? The plan does not say that eminent domain will never be used. Instead, what it says that eminent domain can only be used if the plan is further amended by City Council to add that provision. Because when you set a long corridor, you really don't know what might at some point happen. But today, we cannot use the tool of eminent domain. It would require an amendment to the plan that would cause us to have to go back to City Council and have that project be of such great import that City Council would say, yes, you, Dura, can use that tool. So that was of concern. And then there were others that were just concerned about change. But there was, again, just because you're in an urban renewal area doesn't mean that you have to do anything. The hope is that the blighting conditions will be remedied through redevelopment and that the entirety of the area will be raised up. So similarly, not every property within the urban renewal area has to be blighted. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
So, again, from an entertainment and tourism standpoint, this was a large infill project that we undertook. This was relocating Elitch's from its previous site in northwest Denver to the Central Platte Valley. This, again, was really part of the Webb administration's vision of looking to bring as many amenities in and around downtown as he and the city possibly could. A lot of environmental contamination on this site. We repaid these bonds well in advance of their 25-year clock. So again, just a smattering of projects for downtown. So a couple of things now that we can look back and see how hard those projects were in the early days. But the best news about these projects is not only have they performed well and we've been able to repay the bond obligations, but other development is occurring without our assistance. That really is the true sign that your efforts have been effective, because you've gone in and addressed the pioneering challenges for an area. You don't have to anticipate that you have to support every project, because again, the goal is to prime the pump so that then the area isn't nearly as challenging from a reinvestment standpoint, and development is then being undertaken without public assistance. Now, it took us about 15 years, from when we started to see more and more of it. But that's where we are now. Many of the projects that are happening downtown, most of the projects, not many, virtually all. We did help with Colorado National Bank. That had its own set of circumstances. But really, all of the development that you're seeing in that same 52-block area is happening without any public assistance. Again, I think one of the keys here was the combined efforts of the city, again, the city council, as well as the administration being in absolute lockstep, and engaging the downtown business community through the Downtown Denver Partnership also worked very, very well. The city helped establish the plan. Anybody who came into Denver and was looking for reinvestment opportunities would go directly to the Downtown Denver Partnership. They had a complete inventory of vacant buildings. They knew when leases were up, they knew who the property owners were, and really could say, here are the areas that are most ripe for the reinvestment opportunity. With that, then they could come and talk to us about the potential use of tax increment, and then we would go full circle back to the city to amend the plan to allow for the tax increment to support that specific project.
So I have a question. Did the blossoming of Auraria contribute at all to this? I understand that's a complex issue, but I'm just curious, because they have the main campus, but they've also gotten some stuff that's into the across the river.
And that's That is a sort of a loaded question because the development of Auraria initially was an urban renewal project that resulted in the displacement of a lot of families. That was a long time ago. We really are not involved in the redevelopment that is occurring there, but you're absolutely right. There's an awful lot of new building that is continuing to occur on their campus, and they're really densifying the campus. From a downtown standpoint, we are struggling to provide greater connectivity from the campus to downtown because Spear is a very great barrier.
Yeah, and that's part of what I was asking about. When I got my degree in '92, my last degree, some of the programs had temporary facilities across the river, and that
On the downtown side?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I was curious about that kind of energy pumping into there.
There is some, not as much. Most of the activity is still over on the main campus, but again, the city is really trying to engage the campus much more effectively. There's more student housing now downtown to again help accommodate. There's student housing right on the campus, but then there's other student housing right in downtown. But that is, as soon as you cross Spear, you know you are on the campus, and when you cross it the other way, you know you are in downtown. And so trying to blur that line is a continuing challenge.
And some of that is the busyness of the intersections, right?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. But when I go in, I see kids walking every single day back and forth, which is terrific.
Bruce?
Tracy, you'd mentioned the web administration's vision, and essentially it's my understanding in a broad sense that maybe in their case, but certainly in our case, the council, or because it's Denver and with strong mayor form, somehow there has to be a communication from the elected officials to the Urban Renewal Authority in terms of some level of specific vision. And I guess my question is how did that vision get funneled down to specifics for particular projects? You said you guys have the whole, the urban renewal area was broad, but you got island projects. So at some level, somebody had to say, it'd be great to redevelop Adams Mark, or it would be great to redevelop Denver Drive. Denver Drive pretty obviously was deteriorated, but I mean, moving Elitch's, this kind of stuff. How was that whole process managed over what period of time?
So again, going back to the this downtown summit that was convened, that included numerous meetings and a host of stakeholders. The city also then put together the downtown area plan that, again, laid out the vision for them all, for thinking big about the Central Platte Valley.
With some level of detail.
Decades, before we got to the Central Platte Valley, but with not a super fine grain detail, because again, you want to let the markets work, but again, those three prongs, we need to bring housing downtown. We need to bring retail, and we need to support the convention center. We couldn't attract conventions without a convention headquarters hotel. That's what got the Adams Mark going. That,
Sure.
Said that's what we need to do. We needed to bring retail. That's what got the pavilions going. We have, at least 10 projects that are adaptive reuse of historic buildings, all of which provide housing and affordable housing. So when a developer would come to Denver, if you didn't meet those criteria, you can develop, but don't ask for any assistance, because it was not consistent with the vision that we were looking to implement.
Okay, all right.
But that is maybe a good segue into, I'll just touch on this really quickly.
And before we go there, Tracy, just to probably put a parking lot on your next visit would be some of that idea generation or polishing some of that, so you can help us put the boundaries on that so we're not going too far, too granular. and yet also providing enough that would be valuable for potential developers to take a look at.
Okay, we can do that. On these projects, they're always hard. And so trying to figure out the host of financing tools that need to be brought to bear. These are just some that we used in the projects downtown. They're all still out there. The tax credit investments, particularly on the historic buildings as well as the low-income housing tax credits, continue to be an important tool that developers are using in a variety of projects. The community outreach, again, and this touching a little bit on this, thinking about things that the community wants, bringing in the key city officials, thinking about the environmental issues, education, particularly if we're using the tax increment, but also if we're building new housing, are the educational facilities going to be there? I mean, it included a whole host of folks and a very participatory planning process. So what did we learn from that? It wasn't quick. Like I said, we issued bonds in '89, didn't do our first project until '92. We are just at a point now where development is happening. It wasn't easy, and every project that we had, I think this is going to be a true statement. I do not believe there was a tax increment supported project downtown that received unanimous support from City Council. So, there were a number of them where we were counting our votes right up to the last minute because there was a lot of a question about whether or not that actually was the right project at the right time in the right place. It wasn't cheap.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned eminent domain, and however, that debate you were just talking about, you weren't sure of the votes. However, it had been settled that eminent domain was not going to be used.
Bruce, use your microphone, please.
I'm sorry. It had been settled prior to these discussions, eminent domain was not going to be used without a return to council.
Yes.
So that was not an issue for the consideration of these projects.
That's correct. That's correct, yeah. And it didn't just happen. It took the efforts of everybody, the council, the administration, the Urban Renewal Authority, the partnership, the property owners. And with downtown, we learned that you're never done. There was a point in time where we said, our work downtown is done. Now we can go and do other things. And as soon as you turn your eye away, things start to return and deteriorate. So your downtown in particular is never done. So downtown. We also, and you also, when you look at the areas that you have created, have an opportunity to seize tremendous infill opportunities. And so Denver had a number of those, and I'll touch on just a couple of them, but I want to try to talk to some of that visioning as well. Stapleton, huge infill opportunity with the relocation of the airport out to its current location. Same thing with Lowry, when the Air Force Base was decommissioned, again provided a tremendous infill opportunity. The Gates Rubber Factory that is at I-25 and Broadway. And our new opportunity, one of our new opportunities, is the University of Colorado Hospital campus at 9th and Colorado. Another one that is not on here is the St. Anthony's Hospital campus site. So all of the hospitals are moving out of Denver, but it's leaving infill opportunities for us. So we'll talk a little bit about Stapleton. That is an excerpt of what is referred to as the Green Book, which is the conclusion of about a 10-year visioning process to think about what opportunity this site is presenting and what is the best way for us to, and the us is really all of us, to maximize this infill opportunity that has been presented to us. So again, it's a 4,700-acre site. The vision was to have there be a mix of residents, commercial, as well as parks and open space. And the commercial is both true office and retail. We have found, however, that the office market has yet to really present itself out there. But truly, there was about a 10-year process that was undertaken by a number of groups. And I won't get this exactly right, but there was Stapleton Tomorrow that then got funding from foundations and became the Stapleton Foundation that really helped guide the determination of what this planning would ultimately look like. So at the end of that, was a vision that it would be urban, it would not be a suburban development. It would provide a wide range of housing types and prices, and a lot of emphasis on walkable neighborhoods. The whole new urbanism concept was just emerging at this time. So really focusing on the pedestrian, being able to walk to where you needed to go, even in that large site. So the way that we undertook that, now this again is an example of a project that it was all owned by the city. It was ultimately sold to a master developer for a city. So they had to step up and say, we are willing to implement that vision plan that you have put forward as best we can. We have to be able, we the developer, we have to be able to address changes in the market. You know, for example, like I said, the office market just has not been present at Stapleton. Well, the housing market is. So let's make sure that we maintain that balance of a mix of uses, but not forego opportunities as one of the market segments is potentially lagging the other. So they stepped up and said, we will undertake the development of this. And even with the land price that we are able to purchase this, because it is a big project and fraught with risk, we need assistance in financing the infrastructure. So at Stapleton, we used a combination of primarily tax increment financing and metropolitan district. The tax increment does what we refer to as the trunk infrastructure, the major infrastructure improvements, the regional infrastructure, and then the metropolitan district, the Title 32 mill levy, addresses that in-tract or the connector infrastructure. The tax increment, and this again goes back to that guiding principle of minimizing the impact on the other taxing entities. We realized very early that if we captured all of the tax increment of this 4,700 acre site and put all of these new housing units in play and said, good luck DPS, figure out how you're going to pay for those schools, that would not be a very good partnership, nor would it be very effective from an overall outcome standpoint. So a portion of the tax increment is being used to pay for the construction of 5 elementary schools at Stapleton. They're just in the process of building the first high school at Stapleton. So the tax increment financed the infrastructure, schools, parks, as well as community facilities for the city. The other thing, and I don't think I have a slide on this, but the other thing that is included in this was similar to the burden on DPS. We recognized that there would be a like burden on the city. If we took all of the revenues that this area is generating to just finance the infrastructure and said, good luck city, you're on your own to provide services to this growing area, that also wouldn't be very effective or efficient. So a portion, and an increasing portion over time of the tax increment, is repaid to the city after we've made debt service on the bonds to again offset the cost of providing services to this newly developed community. So it's been very successful. We were worried that they would miss the housing market. They experienced the same lull as everybody else did, but not nearly to the extent that others in the metro area did. So they've been doing a very good job of progressing against that plan with some misses. Like I said, again, the office market is trying to come online. We've just recently seen an increase in the industrial and flex space being undertaken out there. Virtually all of the retail is in, and the remainder of the site, which is the portion most to the north, is going to be, again, primarily residential. We've learned some lessons along the way, though, on this one. First and foremost, it's always easy to spend somebody else's money. And the somebody else's money in this example was the tax increment. So you had this list of infrastructure improvements that were needing to be put in place, and we defined what those would be even as we took the plan to City Council. So the roads were laid out, the sewer lines were sized, and we realized, first of all, that there was too much specificity there. There's no way you're going to be able to determine exactly where a road is going to go and yet not get around to developing it until some point into the future. So we were able to modify the location, but then there would be conversations that, gosh, this road that currently is planned for 4 lanes, since we're in here, we should build it to 6 lanes now. Well, how are we going to pay for it? TIF. And the developer is saying, well, that's great because, the more that we can get access through the site, the better for my development. And the city's saying, that's great. The more we can get TIF to pay for this, then we won't have to be burdened with that in the future. And we looked up and we realized, which goes to this to the second point, that we had spent the capacity that had been generated, and the capacity wasn't going to be necessarily matched with the continuing needs. So instead of managing to the end, we find ourselves in a circumstance now where most likely there won't be enough tax increment to cover all of the infrastructure improvements that still need to be made. So we're working with the city right now on how to bring those into balance. But without that natural management of those monies, again, city isn't paying for it, developer isn't paying for it, somebody else's money, can lead to some challenges. And it's hard work to stick to a good plan. And I think Forest City has done a very good job, in part because the city has a process that when they are getting ready to do the next phase of development, that next phase has to be approved by the city to make sure that the vision continues to be implemented, even recognizing market changes as they occur, as well as political changes. This project will have in the 25 years most likely 4 different mayors and 4 different city councils, and so having that plan and that vision be solid enough to navigate those political changes and whatever they may bring is important. But I think Denver and the community, because the community also, they bought into that Green Book vision as well, and they wanted to make sure that as they lived there and they became the new residents and occupants of those businesses, that ultimate vision was in fact realized. So, any questions on Stapleton? Again, that one is unique because of it all being owned by the city and having one master developer. That's a pretty nice circumstance to have. So Cherokee Gates is another infill site. This one is in here, and we may have touched on this one before. I think everybody knows where this site is. Tremendous opportunity from a location standpoint. One major property owner, RTD, in there as well. This is what an aerial of the site looked at. If you haven't been by there lately, the big factory buildings are all but gone at this point. So again, you can see the blue portion is under redevelopment. It's the yellow and the orange that is not. This was the vision for the plan. It became too aggressive. The market turned against everybody, and we still are left with this, except that the buildings are gone. So some quick lessons learned on that one. You need more than just location, location, location. When you are dealing with environmental issues, they are almost always more expensive than originally budgeted. And want to focus for a moment on this third bullet, which is too many expectations can overwhelm a good project. I think that really happened here, where there were just too many limitations. Gosh, you can't have a retailer bigger than that. You must have this much housing. Of that housing, this much must be affordable. You have to have underground parking. You have to have, and all of a sudden all of those have-to-haves cause this, in combination with the market, to overwhelm this project. And now, and I think we touched on this the last time as well, now we find ourselves where this is a circumstance where we set one tax increment area for the entirety of the site, believing that development was going to happen. When it stalled out, the clock doesn't stop. So we are trying to figure out now, with renewed developer interest, how we can, if we can, reset that button on the public finance. So the timing of the use of the tax increment is really, really important. So just to wrap up this, our cities don't just happen. I mean, I keep coming back to that visioning to make sure that as you look at these opportunities to help affect redevelopment within our cities, it has to be a carefully conceived and then nurtured process. Transparency is important, but it's hard to manage. Developers are not going to want to completely be open book, but that's the role of the Urban Renewal Authority, to really make sure that there is a clear understanding of the need for the investment. the current tools we have right now aren't always enough. And so that's why I think the state has done a good job in trying to bring forward some additional tools, whether it's supporting tax credits, because we just, in Colorado, we just don't have very many tools to help us in our revitalization efforts. But if we do these things right, these public-private partnerships can be extremely successful for all. And again, I keep pointing back to downtown where it was very, very great to see that first project come up out of the ground without any public assistance, because it was a long time coming, but now that is the norm. And that the healthy environment that we had to work to nurture clearly is in place. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Tracy, what we probably need some help in was what I put in the parking lot, which is going through some of that idea process so that at the council level we don't get too granular, yet provide enough fertile ground for developer consideration. And that's probably our next step as a council, unless folks, I think at least I saw at least a couple of heads nod on that. And so the sooner we can probably take that on would be good. And anything else, council?
Great.
Good. Bruce?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think we've got the foundation laid with a sense of the work that Lyft has done with Ann Ricker, that there's an opportunity that's not precluded on some of the areas we want to investigate further. And then the missing other foundational piece then is maybe us and or the planning board to basically get the plan in place for some of the corridors where the condition survey would say it's not unreasonable to start thinking about some of these further issues.
And I'm going to turn a little bit to Tracy on that, because yes, that's true, but I think also what we need is the market or developer interest that comes into play with that, because if we're too prescriptive,
I agree.
Is probably one of the things I very much got out of the lessons learned, which is let the market speak somewhat. We can put constraints on it, but at possibly our peril.
And it's a tough balance. When you look at urban renewal plans, they are generally, I don't want to use the term vague, but they allow for a number of outcomes to be achieved, which I think is important, because you don't know, given that an urban renewal area doesn't have a life to it, tax increment areas certainly do. You want to be able to make sure that the type of projects that you can undertake will continue to make sense. Now, that's not to say that it's so wide open that anything will go in there. So again, it's striking that balance. And then as you take that planning process down from a neighborhood plan or a corridor plan to then when the developments start to come in Denver, they utilize a GDP, a general development plan. We have had some challenges with those where you lay that down with one developer, and if that project doesn't go forward, well, that is now the current plan that needs to be accommodated. And so if another developer comes in and wants to do something different, it's a pretty extensive process to go and amend that GDP to then be more reflective of what that developer is going to do. But that also can serve a great purpose as well. And so by way of example, I mentioned the 9th in Colorado hospital campus site. So that project is now on its third developer. The first redeveloper came in and had a very good vision for the site. But the market, again, darn 2008, moved away on that one. But this was that plan was for a fairly dense residential development with some neighborhood retail. And so there was a general development plan that was put in place to define that development. Once that developer exited the scene, nothing happened on the site, but then a new developer came in who had a different vision, and it was virtually all retail. And so modifications had to be made to the GDP to accommodate that. But what they realized is that there were some that were just too challenging. The modifications to that general development plan just wouldn't work with that complete retail vision. So it caused that to no longer work, among a host of other reasons. Now we have the third developer coming back in, still under that same general GDP. They're back to more of the dense residential development and neighborhood supporting retail. So the sort of the moral of that story is those planning documents can be constraining and confining, but they can also, that sometimes can be a very good thing to make sure that you get actually that project that you really always were looking for.
Tracy, is the concept of changing a GDP or general GDP, is that akin to approving an area plan, or is that akin to a rezone?
More akin to a rezone.
So you'd actually have to go through a rezone from residential to business, back to residential, whatever they were intending, mixed use.
It's not necessarily changing the use, but it can be, if you are modifying the amount of open space that you had, you have to go through that process. And there is community outreach, and there's a minor amendment and a major amendment, but it can be a very involved process to modify the GDP.
That's where the planning board gets involved.
Right. Yep.
How many acres is that?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, gosh. If I were to guess, I would guess wrong. But it is 9 city blocks. I'm trying to imagine it. And that is covered in buildings right now. And so
and graffiti.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
we're
then
anxious
on
to get
that
one going.
land too, then, are you guys, does any of that include the Veterans Hospital?
No.
Okay.
No. And there was some conversation about at some point in the future, relocation of the VA, should we include that? And part of it was just the uncertainty regarding what that timeline really looked like. So no, it does not include the VA property. But we have set the urban renewal area. We've set one property tax increment area to support residential development that is happening on the parcel that is most close to Rose Hospital, if you're familiar with the site. And we would hope to amend the plan to approve the use of tax increment to support the current development vision, ideally by the end of this year.
So Tracy, I'm going to ask the city manager to brief you as to what is the status and schedule as quickly as we can the follow-up on where our ideas can be and taking a look at that. So, sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you for your time again, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
And council, remember breakfast at 7:30 tomorrow upstairs.